We're going to be going here soon, or in a little bit. HP just hit me with a survey thing, and I actually do want to fill it out because this is a pretty decent notebook. Definitely want to fill it out. So give me a few minutes to work that out there. Get that work filled out. Sorry. Trying to do a million things right now. For a little bit, HP just hit me with a survey thing, and I actually do want to fill it out because this is a pretty decent notebook. Definitely want to fill it out. So give me a few minutes to work that out there. Get that work filled out. Sorry. Trying to do a million things right now. It's that time again. It's that time again. Get some music going. Music going.
No time in the dance, you see. Protocol service, top like a spring. Step, step, two step, two step, two step, one, two step. creating this mess deep down inside this big machine with all of the rest. Break free to phase electricity. Time turning up the volume. Time turning on us always. No time at all to hold. Turning back to where we began. Trying to select us, test it. Find into our direction. Sebastian was detected. Delirium unsuspected. Started to live to reason. Down in the deep deepest. Transgressions become completed. 73 to listen. It's the destiny alone in a trance, no escaping from this waking dream, no hope for advance. You see, the mortal core is serving not but a spring. Unwind, too slow, too quick, too much to believe. World's a fantasy, you fail the test. Ever forging all new fantasies, creating more mess. Direct through this brick machine with all of the rest. DC, dying, electricity. Falling back right into the system. Falling back on all its ways. We're falling back right out of the system. It's falling back right into the space. It's falling back right out of the system. Something falling back together. Falling back is dancing. Falling back into pieces again. Sounds that we've been breathing. Every part of beating. Every beat and beating. Radical slow and freedom. Energy slowly seeping. Suspending all disbelief. Said you if I'm beating. Said I was finally breathing. So freezing. Shaping a peaceless season. Reason to keep believing. Waking the beast to sleeping. Know this destiny, you're caught in a trance. Every marking sign and trying to dream, no sign of the dance. You see, the mortal core we serve is taught like a spring. Step back, two step, 1, 2, 3. Our world's a fantasy, no more than a test. Ever feeding off the fallacy, creating this mess deep down inside this big machine with all of the rest. Break free to phase electricity. Time turning up the volume. Time turning on us always. No time at all to hold. Turning back to where we began. Trying to select us, test it. Find into our direction. Sebastian was detected. Delirium unsuspected. Started to live to reason. Down in the deep deepest. Transgressions become completed. 73 to listen. It's the destiny alone in a trance, no escaping from this waking dream, no hope for advance. You see, the mortal core is serving not but a spring. Unwind, too slow, too quick, too much to believe.
right. Well, get some music on. Just saw a video thumbnail that says, "Is green cleaner Dawn soap?" That's amazing. That's amazing that that has to be a topic. I want to be 100 with you. I've never seen Dawn dish soap have soybean oil in it or alcohol. Smokes up, everybody. Yeah, the dog barking outside. I think he knows I'm down here. Someone let him out to feed. Been relatively quiet. Sorry about that. Still smoking. Put something on. Let me find something good.
Now who elected you judge and jury in the body of a beautiful girl? And I suspect heavy gerrymandering at the singles bar. And now I'm a man with conversation skills, and I'm a man with $100 bills. And just to look in my direction one time is all it's gonna take now. Come on, man. Hey, hey, hey. I know you think I'm just another sucker perpetrator living in the 213. And I don't care what you say about any of that, no. It don't matter to me, yeah. I see you driving around in your fancy car. You're a superstar living in the 310. And I will freak you like you've never been freaked before now. And I'm ready to go, yeah. Hey, hey, hey. Come on. It's you, water, I'm the bomb. And I'm ready to go off in your shit. It's you, water, I'm the bomb. And I'm ready to go off in your shit. It's you, water, I'm the bomb. And I'm ready to go off. Ready to go off now. Hey girl, when I'm fucking you, it's like nothing else matters. They gonna reach down between my legs and ease the seat back. Strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger. Furious anger. I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger. Furious anger. And you will know my name is the Lord. When I lay my and I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger. Furious anger. I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger. Furious anger. Furious anger.
As a game master, embracing the goddess energy within yourselves will bring all of you to a new understanding and valuing of life. Like a priceless jewel buried in dark layers of soil and stone, Earth radiates her brilliant beauty into the caverns of space and time. Perhaps you are aware of those who watch over your home and experience it as a place to visit understanding and valuing of life. Like a priceless jewel, buried in dark layers of soil and stone, Earth radiates her brilliant beauty into the caverns of space and time. Perhaps you
So there we go. That's the topics for today. Driving plant performance. How do we do? So there's a lot of things that we can do, of course. And I left room for more because they're going to come along to us as we go. And that was probably the biggest part of the wind up there, was getting all that listed up there. Because indeed, there's quite a bit to it. Suppose we'll start from top to down. Wet dry is really important to the plant. Um, Wet dry is like you getting filled up and then getting hungry again. Um, I like to say that a lot of ways plants are like goldfish; they'll keep eating because they're trying to maintain a stasis between the media and themselves. Uh, so when the soil dries out, that's our one opportunity to either water, feed tea, or feed it. And if we feed it, do we feed it more? Do we feed it less? And do we feed it different things, or do we keep feeding what we're feeding right now? The other bit, the wet dry, specifically in vegetative growth, this is what's going to drive root growth. We're not dry. When we speak on wet dry, we don't mean truly dry. So we'll put that there. That's not truly dry. Damp. And like if there's a mistake about understanding what damp and wet is and what soaked is, that's 3 different stages, right? Damp means it has a little bit of moisture in it. Wet means it's been wetted. And soaked means it's thoroughly saturated. Drenched means it's past saturated and it's gone into over. So we're looking to hit our media, particularly our cocoa, before it hits bone dry. We don't want bone dry at all. And it's for a myriad of reasons. It kind of messes with our fungus and our bacteria that we've been putting into our soil. It's going to kill off some of the root ends. And arguably we can make more root ends. But we're trying to keep the steam going full. Wet dry is also important because it's the time that the plant is definitely looking for moisture. Because it doesn't need it just twice a week. It needs moisture pretty much all the time, right? And that doesn't mean we keep the pot soaking wet all the time, but it means the plant is using water all the time. Whether it's internal, you're taking it up from the soil or the cocoa or whatever your media is, your hydro, etc. Your plant is always doing something with water. And we'll get into that a little bit too, because you just reminded me of another thing. Good job there. Plants poop. They definitely poop. So we go through wet-dry cycles where the moisture content goes down and the plant's trying to maintain stasis. It will definitely look for more places of moisture. And so that dry cycle, drying out cycle, kind of helps promote that. This is also going to be accelerated by your things like Rapid Start, Rhizoblast, Roots Accelerator Gold, Rhizotonic, and the list goes on, to be honest with you. Most of them are going to be like derived out of willow bark and barley extract. The ones you won't see like that are Regeneroot, which I believe I have right here in a sample bottle. And this one's pretty plain and simple, and one of their claims to fame is that Regeneroot doesn't use hormones to cause root growth. And the reason for this is they want, and this is science, when you use one products, they have hormones in them, like a Rapid Start or whatever, anything that's got barley and willow bark extract in it, kelp, you're going to get hormones into it, and what that's going to do is shuttle more energy to the roots, but some of that energy is going to be lost for the canopy. The amount of research I've done on this hasn't been a gigantic amount, while, but it's definitely a thing. That said, I used Rapid Start for over 10 years. I've used Rhizoblast for intermittently and in between, and I like it as well. Uh, but for a long time, the containers just weren't as big as I needed, and I just got comfortable with Rapid Start after a while. Any of the ones I mentioned are great ones, and like I said, there's a lot more out there that are awesome that way. But you can think of those as root accelerators. It's not something that's just going to make root as much as, like, say, a clone gel does, but it will definitely accelerate root growth. And this is something we need to consider, especially going on a flower. It's one of these products that at some point you're going to come off of, simply because when it gets past the stretch phase and the vegetative parts of the plant are done, the root mass is kind of done, like trying to expand, like with that, right? And we see that in just about all kinds of plants out there. If you know what a tree ring is, you definitely know what that means. Uh, the canopy extends far around as the root mass, for the most part, goes, and that's your line there. Specifically with trees, because you get a lot of water entrapment that way that's going to get fed right to the tree. Uh, and so with that part, oh shit, sewer. We got another one coming up. And now that I thought of it. So with that said, once that stretch is kind of done, so is the root mass. And so the thing we can do is we can drop that off when we start going into flower, into the mids and the lates when the plant starts. If you got a GMO or a glue, it's probably going to keep stretching for a while, so keep an eye on it. But basically, when all that vegetative growth is kind of halted and it's really gone into flower stage, that root product just really isn't needed anymore. You can save a lot of money that way, ppms, and it's just unneeded hormones. It's totally cool to come off those kinds of products there. Regenerate can help rebuild those. It's a pretty cool product that way. But generally speaking, name of the game, wet dry, and we're going to see that a lot, is like working on root mass. And more roots, more fruits is like the canon that you're going to hear, and it's true. The next is going to come into light and food ratio. So when we talk about light and food ratio, we can pretty much look at light as the amount of work I'm doing at the gym, and the food is there to replace everything that I used up while I was working out. You notice I didn't call it a cheeseburger or something like that. It's not. The plant only really needs as much as it needs. Because much, again, like goldfish, it's just going to eat, 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 eat. So this is a game of moderation, and knowing when it wants and when it doesn't. And that'll tie into number 3 there with the timing. The other bit to consider too is the lower wattage of light, so the lower intensity of light. As far as micro, all that goes, as far as light energy goes, I should say, right, to really just blanket it up nice and easy. The less amount of light energy you have, the less amount of food you feed. And conversely, the more light energy you have over that plant, the more food it's probably going to end up eating, just because of the amount of work that, increased. And that'll come in later too into a triangle with CO2. Learning how to manage your food and light ratio is going to be something that's going to prevent burn, uh, toxicity, lockout, everything. Lockout is really just you burn those hairs off and you bombed it with food, right? Lockout can also be my soil was just wet all the time, so I rotted my roots, and so it's really just root rot. There's a lot of answers for why nutrient lockout is just the outcome of a lot of different things, but mostly it comes from burning root ends. This is why sometimes you like, I don't say 100% of the cases, but this is why when people are attempting to really fix those problems, it's really a big hardcore focus on the roots, and I don't know if the angle's being looked at it properly, where it's just like I fed it so much that I just mangled the soil up, and so the plant can't eat, as so much as like the plant doesn't have lips right now. If it doesn't have lips, it's not going to eat. You have to build those root hairs and everything back up. And at the same time, since you burn them out, we're looking for pathogens and everything else. So by really minding how much like light and food we're going into things with, the better we're gonna be at a long term, just overall in general. Like plant health, it's booming and it's not burning. That's a great thing. That'll come in here too in the field. This is gonna end up being like a big thing. So going into timing too, it's like I said with the root accelerators, it's knowing when to knock off of them and just use that space for something else. If you know you have something that stretches for quite a while, you know your nutrition regimen is going to have to be different from something that doesn't stretch very long. Something that isn't very leafy and doesn't stretch a lot probably won't need as much of nitrogen. Uh, if it's got fat stalks and stems and stuff like that, it's likely going to want the calcium from it if it's that way. Cushions generally like more calcium. Stuff in cocoa, a lot of it's buffered, but like a lot of people still end up having to add extra CalMag into the equation there. And one would argue that calcium is like a great thing in general for cannabis all throughout its vegetative stage and going through a bit of the front end of flower, like say the first couple of weeks of flower, if any. We really just need enough calcium to help, build the things, and the same for the nitro, but we're not looking for a ton of it there. Conversely, if you're looking at like your CalMax has a problem with your nitrogen, you probably have other problems to think about. And so going along, uh, as far as like when we're going through flower, we're seeing not just flower as a stage or two stages or three stages. There's like five, six. We could argue about stages for a while, but there's multiple stages to the flowering cycle. What I like to tell people is you spend a little time going through transition, and then after that you go through like two, three, and we're talking about like 8 weekers here. Plants to go through 8 weeks of flower. You're looking at something like 2, 3 weeks of stretch. After that, you go, and while it's stretching, it's building some flower. But right after that, we're going to notice as we get into 4, 5, 6 that the plant really starts to take on flower sites. And after we're coming out of 6, we might see some bulking, but right around there, going into 7, 7 and 8, that's when we see our most remarkable fruit set there. In this case, flower set. The flower set's basically the density that we're going to get out of it, right? The girth and all that. So we're recognizing what we call like hallmark phases, right? Uh, Growth. And I gotta fix up that one above it now, don't I? So again, it's recognizing hallmark phases of growth, and again, like I said, it's like seeing the front chunk of flower as like a transitionary stage, like a factory going from making cars to trucks. We can't do it tomorrow. We have to get all the parts in. We have to retrain all the workers. We might even need more or less crew to do it. Everything changes, and much is the same as going to be for this plant going through these stages, right? It's just as we go through the stages of each side, like whether we're talking about seedlings, immature plants to mature plants, or what you'd even say teens, then mature plants. There's a couple stages in there, so we might be making light duty trucks, then we switch up to the kitted out ones, and then a couple months down the line we start making 150s, then 250s, right? Shit like that. There can be gradual changes, and we can kind of adapt on the fly because we've been building trucks or we've been building cars for a hot while here. And if they're using the same platform, not so bad, right? Whereas in this case, right, it's kind of the same deal. Once I get into the flower and pretty much all the hormones have changed over, the plant's starting to take up what it needs to facilitate different growth patterns. That's going on. And that's going to be somewhere like our second week is what we'd hope for. Once we start seeing kind of a shoot of growth, and those flower sites, that's exactly what we're looking at. We're about to hit the stretch right now. And we might as well, that's like, wow. You don't want to say that that's like number 17 down there for sure. Because that can be a big deal as well. This defeats people all the time. The stretch defeats people all the time, especially if it's glue and GMO and stuff like that. Stuff that's known stretching. The stuff that made GMO really popular was backload because it stopped foxtailing out of control and really started getting dense and packing on like cones instead of pinheads. I don't want to say pinheads, that's unfair, but looked like unstranded rope. Just a whole bunch of these, a whole bunch of flower fingers. And so once they tapped it with that, it firmed right up, but you lost all the smell and all that. Not good for you, too. But it's recognizing that that happens, how long it happens, and how much of a response that it causes, right? How much of a stretch do I get it? Some of these things just take off like rockets. Some are kind of gradual and they kind of scale up, right? Some are pretty much just benchmark. 2 weeks, go like this, I'm done, right? GMO is like, I'm like the, okay, right? Some others are like, boom, that's it. So it's something to consider. And you can get feedback from what you see online or from other growers. If you go to a shop, it's fairly safe to assume that someone may have ran what you have, especially if it's something more of a known kind of variety. If it's something popular for sure, you're probably going to have someone that knows something. And if you can get them to come off how much their plant stretched as a genetic, right? Don't come at them like it's a personal thing. Be straight up. Look, I'm looking to grow this, and I was just interested in what you thought about like the stretch rates on this. Does this thing stretch a lot? And if so, what would you say? Does it keep stretching to week 5 or mid flower or something, or does it kind of just smooth into it? What's the word, right? And if the person has time, more often than not, they're going to probably reply to you, and the information, even if it's not from an expert, you can pick up on, holy moly, man, that thing just kept going. You don't, like, it would be great to know the details, but right off rip, this thing's probably got legs on it, and it's going to stretch for a while here. Timing can also be a thing of when I feed, what I feed, and how I feed it, and that's why it's right next to the field. So that's why I'm just going to put that right under there. Grab a drink. So we're talking about what feel means as part of like knowing what the stretch is going to be like on stuff that you repeatedly grow. If you grow the same strain for a while, you'll know exactly how far it's going to stretch, when it packs the flower on, uh, all that. You'll know how hard it is to clone, how easy it is to clone, whether pests love it or don't really mind it, right? Like how that all works out. You'll have a pretty good understanding of exactly what those plants are pretty much capable of do if you keep a good eye on them. Specifically, if we're looking at how much food we fed and we really pay attention to looking at the plant after we fed it, not just the next day, right? The next day is whatever, almost. If as long as you're seeing positive growth, you're probably pretty happy there. But look at it for the next few days is what I'm really trying to say here. First day can be a deal, but the next few after that are really going to tell you what's going on. Your fresh growth at the very top of the plant is always the freshest growth, and the plant's always prioritizing it. So the fresh growth is always going to give you the best indicator of whether you corrected a food mistake or something like that, or if you hit the nail. Feel can be things like knowing when the plant's not going to be doing it, when it's kind of slowing down, when it's humming along. recognizing that perfect color of green, particularly when it goes through the flower stage, um, how the stems are growing, how the leaves look physically. Uh, Curled leaves wanting more calcium and all these other things, right? uh, why they're toppling over, why the tips are turning down, and being able to correct that. Knowing how to stay ahead of all that, really, though. Once you really get timing and feel like getting into that, you should be looking to get into ways where you just don't have these problems ahead of time, right? Keep notes on your flowers, on your plants. Uh, this is 2021. Keep a notebook. It's going to be okay. uh, if you want to keep it on a digital file somewhere and you can just log into it incognito, whatever you gotta do. Like if you take notes about what you're doing and the feedback that the plants give you, you will be a better gardener. That is 100%, and it is $2 to do it. Straight up $2 at your local dollar store will get you a composition book and a pen, a pack of pens. If you get them on a sale time near school, you might even get 2 notebooks for $1 and an 8 pack of pens, multicolor pack of pens, so you can do editing and noting and everything. Right? Get a calculator. Right? If you got a phone, you're pretty good, but like if you keep a calculator down here, there's no excuse for you not to slack off on your measurements. Knowing really what is, I don't want to say it like your kids or their pets or something, but it's kind of like that. And if you know what your kids or your pets like, then yeah, no, you've kind of got this part figured out. You just need to apply that same skill set to learning how to do it with plants. This is entirely it. You'll get to learn what each variety, each genetic, and so when you take clones off these things, they're just copies of them, and they'll do the exact same thing. And if you keep doing the exact same thing and it's working right, it'll keep working right. And from there, that's where we really work on feel, because now we've seen it so many times, we really know what to expect out of it. So it's expectations, tolerances, right? You never know how far over the line is until you go over the line and it happens, especially when you're new with something, with anything, whether it's like flipping the flower too late so they stretch out of control, underfeeding, or not letting them get big enough. Putting too many plants under a light, too big of a plant under a light, just overall, even if you canopy it out. You can run into that problem for sure. So timing goes right in there because again, these have a lot to do with each other. We're gonna take this corner spot out where I flung the marker down there because we need that room. Our environment dictates just about everything. What we can do environmentally is probably what you should do. Going over that gets you into trouble. This is where we see the places that perpetually have trouble with mildew, perpetually trouble with mites, um, both all the time, every time, and they're buying sprays nonstop, and the bugs just don't go away. And the bugs get tougher, and you use tougher shit, and then the tougher shit doesn't work anymore, and you're in a big bad problem now. And if you share clones, you're a bad person because now those people just inherited those super mites, and if they're breeding, they're making more super mites, and they're breeding, so they are making more super mites. Pat yourselves on the back. Proper IPM escapes all those problems. You can use a lot of stuff that's made out of essential oils like rosemary and all that, and those work just fine for an IPM. A lot of them now have like corn oil in them. That's like Pure Crop One, I know Mammoth Biocontrol or Pest Control or whatever has thyme in it as well. You'll find a few others that have rosemary or thyme or both of them in there, and those work just fine for that. All Pro Plus is one that's made out of essential oil, and that's a little bit stronger because it's got a big blend of them. Organicide 3-in-1 is the same deal. We're at a lot of oils. That one's and we don't want to hit them hard with this all the time because the oils do weigh on the plants and they do kind of stifle them a bit. But if we use them right properly, if we mix between that and say something like Dr. Zymes or Flying Skull, we're looking good. And the enzymes help get the oil off the leaves anyhow. So we need humidity control, temp control, and so the big thing about that is it's not only just HVAC, right? So it's not always just dehumidifiers, air conditioning. Some places you do need both, some places you don't. And depending on the size of your grow, sometimes you don't really need either, especially depending on the area you live. But in the end, as you scale up, this is an inescapable thing. You at some point will have to dedicate some time, money, and electricity to your environment. If your humidity is always just skyrocket, the plants get stifled out. If it's too dry, the plants get sucked dry. And we also introduced a host of other problems. Humidity that flip-flops, and the struggle of every grower will be day and night humidity, because at night it gets cooler, and so your humidity changes. This is particularly really big when it's a rainy season, switching seasons from winter to fall or spring to summer, anything like that. If you live in a place that gets a lot of swing that way, this will become like a big battle for you. And if you win this battle, though, you are scot-free and you won't have troubles. You won't really get mildew as long as your humidity swing is less than 10%. If it's less than 10%, we're great. Really looking good. As we scale up and get into bigger facilities, the funny part is it just gets harder to do. And that's because of the insulation factors at a lot of places. They're already built out industrially. Your common, whatever you want to call it, a warehouse, it's not always the greatest place to grow in. Depending on the roof, especially if it's just a metal roof, like that insulation's terrible up there compared to something that's tailor-made. Smaller grower can have a little bit more control there, especially if they're just in a sealed up wing of their basement. That's way more controllable. The small area, so I don't have to devote as much electricity to it, and the size of gear can vastly outweigh my troubles. So with that, I can, even if I have to spend more, I can get that under control, provided I have enough electrical service to do it. But what we can do with the environment to play with it is to use higher temperatures to make quicker growth rates. And if I can keep my humidity around like 40-45% all the time, we're pretty good. In flower, I'm not picky. I'll tell you the same numbers. 40-45 the whole way, write it on. You can say that the higher humidity in veg is more suitable, and it definitely is. And you're probably going to find that you don't dedicate as much HVAC, if at all, to your bedrooms. And so you're going to find there's usually just higher temps and higher humidity that's static. You will have to think about it a bit when you're running 18.6, of course, because you are going to have lights off time. And even if they're fluorescents, you will see a drop in temperature. And so in some cases, a dehumidifier is not a bad idea in there when the lights turn off, and it might even hold the temperature about par. And if you do that, you just don't have a whole lot of humidity swing, and the dehumidifier doesn't have to work really hard. When you're doing something like, say, a winter grow and you live where it's cold and it's going to be really dry, humidifier might be a thing for you because it's going to be really dry, And as much moisture as that plant's taken in, it's being evaporated off the soil and it's being pulled out of the plant itself. So, a bit of forecasting. And it literally means forecast too. So we're even talking about keeping tabs on the weather because we know if we got a rainy stretch up here, and if you're in the Midwest, you definitely know what that is. If you're out west, you definitely know what dry is, right? And so it's prolonged, right? Especially out west, but it's knowing what's coming ahead so I can be prepared for it. Procrastination, right, or just letting doom come to you that could be prevented. If you have the means to get something ahead of time to prevent disasters, please do. Even if it's something you're only going to use a couple times a year, keep in mind you are investing at least 8 weeks of flower time and somewhere between 2 to 5 weeks in veg. You've had mother plants growing the whole time, or you're buying seeds and popping them, or you're cloning off a clone, right? Like, you're investing a lot of time, a lot of effort, and especially if you're doing it right, a lot of pruning, a lot of canopy management, and all this other stuff. No, yeah, like, what are you doing? This is literally farmer tech. Like, farmers literally work the hard stuff so that the payoff in the fall is good. And that's how growing things works. Whether it's a human or anything else, a pet, it's the input and hard work that we put in that provides a great result in the end. And that doesn't escape anywhere in life. And the beauty of this whole thing about grow is a lot of it's like that universally through everything you already know. It's connecting dots. And this is like you said, managing danger, yo. If you have a lot of open water in your barrels and stuff, stop that. Try to put lids on them. Anything you got a reservoir for something that holds water, try to have a lid on it. It'll help the water stop escaping. And if it's possible, um, try to keep the reservoir outside. Keep it out the room, and if you can, feed it in with the hose. Conversely, don't leave water in your saucers. Just don't do it. There's a ton of reasons to not do it, and one of the smaller reasons is because all that water in that saucer is going to evaporate out, and then it adds to humidity. It also makes the bottom of saucers nasty. It's also how you get bad growth. It's how you get insect growth. A lot of larvae will hatch right in the water there. Parents will put it right in there. The other bit is you don't want the whole idea of getting runoff is so that you get rid of the old food on the plate and you bring a new plate of food to the plant. The plant can't move. It can't get just shove the food off the plate or any of that. It has to rely on water to do all that work. And in this case, we also have to moderate the food because we're deciding what the plant gets. It's part of the game, right? So when we when we water, we get runoff. We're getting rid of it so again we can get new food on the plate and we can either correct, adjust, increase, decrease, or do whatever we want with the food. Give it tea and microbes to help reinforce root growth, just soil health in general. And we can do a lot of things there. And the whole goal is to replace what's there to put in the new to do the thing. And we need to do things week by week. We have to keep up with this plan, right? We can't be ahead of it because we're going to be putting in food that it doesn't need yet and won't use yet, and we'll burn it now. We'll hinder it now. So we're trying to hit the marks right here. So in doing that, we want to make sure that completely happens. Um, find over time, if I just leave that water, it's going to leach right back in. So I'm not just replacing the food. I just added food to the old food now because it got sucked back up or soaked in, right? Because the soil will have a lower concentration of salt. The saucer will have a higher concentration of salt, and osmosis works by balance, and that salt will try to get back in and balance itself out. So it's doing stuff like that, right? So when we consider food sources, we're really talking about whether it's organic, synthetic, and what kind of synthetics it is, whether it's urea or any other nitrates. And there's quite a few of them out there. Um, Things like whether we're talking about monopotassium phosphate or potassium hydroxide and some other phosphorus chain, right? Is that potassium sulfate? There's a lot that can go to it, and we're going to see that, like when we look at something like say liquid cool bloom that's at a 1010 versus say a hydroplex from Botanicare that's I think a 7.6 or 10.6 or 10.7 or something like that. Look at the bottles. It's really because Botanicare one has a bigger spread of phosphorus and potassium. So think of that as just different kinds of variety of potatoes, whether they're mashed, scalloped, baked potato, or what have you. Just 5 or 6 different kinds of potato, and the plant takes them up at different rates, eats on them in different rates, right? So their intention there, much like say Heavy 16 Fire is another good example, multiform, where the hope is like we have something available at a wider pH range. There's something always there that's phosphorus and potassium the plant is willing and happily taking up. And so the goal with something like that is to really balance it out, right? How much is too much? And can I feather it? Can I use 2 different kinds of things to fit the same shoe, but moderate how much of each one I get to meet the same bang? And at the same time, maybe I set something up to be a low burner for a long while, and I just kind of pop it once in a while, right? Because that would get into like timing and feel. When did these flowers really bulk it on? I can have this low fire one kind of go in this low fire watered down bird guano deal, or just a low 1.3 pk, and run it for most of my flower. And then when I know that thing's really popping, maybe I do hit it with a harder one. Or like late when I go from say liquid cool bloom to dry cool bloom and the ratios change, that's there to bulking it up. That's part of the timing and fill. When do I actually add that up for the particular stuff I'm growing in my room and my environment? Because what you grow, that same GMO will use again, is going to work a little bit different in your room because of size, lighting, food choices, and that kind of thing. And even grow method, right? Whether we're talking about peat moss, cocoa, or like some form of hydroponic that's pure play. If we're playing in water, it's going to work different from those mediums, just like peat moss and cocoa have differences themselves. So with that said, we also have to consider uh, the type of food that we're feeding in each one of these, because if I'm feeding organic sources into a hydroponic system, it's really hard to keep from turning into like sour tea. Let me get the camera working. I bumped it. Here you go. I'm gonna have to pop the stream off real quick to get this to click again.